So we knew it was coming at some point, guys. We had to re-review Erentil in this sandbox. Now, one time, we tracked down the god roll to this fusion rifle, tested it out, and I was blown away by it, because I had played with previous rolls before, but not the god roll, which was essentially backup plan alongside a number of other perks that allow this fusion to be super consistent. But in update 2.8.0, there was a huge rework. First up, fusion rifles in general had an adjustment to its target acquisition, where it no longer accounted for precision locations, meaning it should be easier to hit opponents where you want to hit them, which is dead center in the chest. The other change was that damage fall off for the weapon archetype will now floor at 0.5 times instead of its previous 0.75. On top of that, effective range and the impact of the optic stat for this weapon archetype has been reduced across the board, aka we got a blanket nerf to range for all fusion rifles. So kind of a double whammy. I mean, not only did damage fall off occur sooner now or in less range, but on top of that, damage itself will drop off more severely. Now, like we mentioned a second ago, Erentil and its god roll being backup plan, that trait by itself also got adjusted. States that backup plan now adjusts impact to match the rapid fire sub archetype while active. Charge time is now set to match rapid fire sub archetype 0.85 while active. Not gonna get in charge time too much. Backup plan for the most part is still performing very similar to how it was before in terms of charge time. Now, backup plan grants us reduced charge time and increased handling speed for a short time immediately after swapping to this weapon. Previously, there was no difference in damage. You had the benefits of that very fast charge time, which was damn near immediate by the time you swapped to your weapon, but simultaneously a ginormous amount of damage. Now though, even within optimal range, you're looking at damage of around 34-35 damage per bolt, which of course matches that of rapid fire fusions. Now, when we start really dropping the damage like this takes away from the strength of being a high impact fusion. High impacts, the beautiful thing about them is that they really only require 4 bolts to get a kill. Erentil, Loaded Question, Alantha, Shock and Awe, Wiz and Rebuke, man, they hit around 48 damage per bolt, excluding of course if you're rocking things like high impact reserves or liquid coils. But hitting 48 damage per bolt, for the most part, will easily grant you a kill with just 4 bolts landing. But when we start dropping things down to rapid fire territory, well, now you're gonna start requiring 6 bolts in order to ensure a kill. And this is before damage fall off even begins. My experiences so far is that backup plan is pretty much where it's supposed to be. Essentially anything 19 meters or below, I think a backup plan Erentil is still gonna secure you a kill, especially when combined with other perks. I like to rock it with things like Under Pressure, some like to go with Firmly Planted, whatever the case may be. Backup plan is now what it's supposed to be, which is essentially a trait that allows you to shut down shotgun rushers. Before, we didn't necessarily use it that way. We used it more offensively rather than defensively, which takes us to what is now the new god roll for Erentil. First, I just want to mention that Erentil is still a phenomenal choice inside of Crucible. Matter of fact, any high impact fusion rifle is still going to serve you well. Now, Erentil is probably one of the easier ones to obtain through the menagerie. Load up some of these chalice combinations and bam, you could possibly grant yourself a good god roll. But the perks that we wanted to try here today was a super consistent roll, which was essentially Rangefinder, Under Pressure, Projection Fuse, and just a scope perk to increase that zoom and range, which by the way greatly affects these weapons and their damage fall off. The other trait combination I wanted to go for was actually tap the trigger in Under Pressure together. Kind of a weird one, I know, but you'll be surprised how nasty this can be together. Now, before somebody jumps in and say, why are you going with Under Pressure instead of Firmly Planted? Either one of those, in my opinion, will work fine. Firmly Planted is obviously great if you find yourself crouching, but do not overlook Under Pressure. 9 times out of 10, you are spawning with only 2 rounds in your magazine, meaning initially, before the gunfight even begins, Under Pressure is active, improving that stability and accuracy because you are on the bottom end of that magazine. And again, the closer you get to 1, the more Under Pressure procs. It does things like making the weapon more vertical, keeping those fusion rifle shots together. On top of that, it's a noticeable pull when I beat in on a target. Combining that with tap the trigger was a very interesting one because essentially tap the trigger also granted you that increased stability and accuracy. Multiplied that with Under Pressure, it was kind of crazy. The problem is that this roll specifically, nothing was really boosting range despite having that optic sight. Essentially seeing damage fall off begin somewhere around 19 meters. Now that's not to say you can't get a kill past that point, but you start to lose the flavor of being a high impact fusion, going from now requiring instead just 4 bolts to get a kill to now 5 to then 6. You see where we're going with this. Consistency really starts to deviate due to that damage fall off. Now the other role that we want to try is actually one of my personal roles. I like this one because we actually ante things up. It's got a scope perk, which increases our range, liquid coils for that jump up there in damage, although it does increase charge time to 900. Under pressure again for the improved stability and accuracy, but the trait here, high impact reserves, also increases the damage per bolt when on the lower end of the magazine, which is what we're going to be doing anyways because we're taking advantage of under pressure. All of this combined with a rangefinder masterwork. This was one of my favorite roles for a very long time because it just packed a hell of a punch. Now when playing with this role, my experiences were pretty good, but understand, especially with something like liquid coils, you're going to have to get used to that 900 second charge time, meaning that pre-fire, that pre-charge around the corner is even more important than ever before. Damage wise though, yes, you're going to be seeing damage numbers around 51 damage per bolt, which is pretty ginormous. Kind of an overkill because you really don't need that much damage, right? I mean, it's already a 4 bolt kill. So why do we need more damage than that? Well, the question kind of came up for me is what's more valuable, rangefinder or high impact reserves? That's really the thing that's the face off here. Not necessarily liquid coils. Even though liquid coils does elevate the damage, I will say 900 second charge time, I wouldn't recommend it, guys. Yes, it throws the damage up, but that extra 40 milliseconds can really get you in a bind. So highly recommend still stay around that 860 default charge time. But if we are going to be looking to elevate damage, let's just see if high impact reserves is actually the way to go. When comparing like damage fall off as well as one hit kill ranges, this role with high impact reserves as well as liquid coils could secure a kill at about 24 meters. And you'll notice the bolt damage is around 29 to 31, but on average is about 30 damage per bolt. Now, when I compare this to actually Defang's role, which is a pretty good role, everything here is very similar, except we have things like projection fuse and rangefinder. Its one hit kill potential is 26 meters, maybe a little more, like 26, 26.5. It too is also hitting 30 damage per bolt, but has an entire 2 meters more. So yeah, to state the obvious, rangefinder increases range. The point I was trying to get to though was high impact reserves on the same level as rangefinder. Could it actually be the same benefits, increasing that bolt damage without necessarily increasing that zoom? You've heard from other people in the community, myself included, some weapons with that increased zoom can throw you off a bit, even on something like a fusion rifle. So the point is, at least from what I found, was that just having rangefinder on this high impact fusion upped that consistency way more, allowed for much longer one hit kill ranges without having to do crazy shenanigans like liquid coils to increase that damage, thus allowing us to stay at that default 860 charge time. So with all that being said, what's the god roll? Well, first up, I just want to bring up that backup plan is still very much a viable option, but you got to remember that your fusion rifle, especially if you're going to be quick swapping to it, is going to be doing significantly less damage, thus meaning you need to keep all your gunfights 20 meters or less with this fusion. I'm pretty bad about it because a lot of times, especially if I'm holding an Erentil or just any high impact fusion, I'm going for the cross map. That's the only thing I'm thinking about. You can't do that with backup plan though, or you're just going to leave people one shot, and normally if they've got a good primary shot, they're going to kill you. I will say though that backup plan in combination with things like under pressure or even firmly planted are still great options when taking down shotgun rushers. Now with that being said, I think the biggest use from Erentil in this sandbox is what high impact fusion rifles were intended for, which is that mid-range, to stretch things out to that 24 to 26 meter range and to keep consistency at an all-time high. That's what's going to catch your opponents off more than anything, especially in this sandbox where there's so many people ape shotgunning. You'd be surprised how well a well-rolled Erentil will work in this sandbox, simply because people have not seen fusion rifles. They just haven't. Like as soon as backup plan got a nerf and fusion rifles in general got a nerf, people just threw them on the ground and started spitting on them. But if you got a rangefinder roll, maybe rangefinder with firmly planted, maybe even rangefinder with under pressure, if you don't like to sit there and crouch, that roll will serve you so well. It will catch people off guard so many times. Combine that with either one of these great boosting scopes and perhaps projection fuse or even particle repeater, you're gonna have yourself a fantastic fusion. Now I know a lot of people, when we talk about fusion rifles, especially high impacts, they ask us why we don't talk about things like Wisdom Rebuke or other high impact fusions. Not that those fusion rifles are not good. I've got a couple row Wisdoms that I very much love. I think probably the biggest benefit that I've seen from Erentil over something like Wisdom is just simply the scopes, guys. Understand that zoom plays a very large role in in boosting the range on these fusions. And we're not talking about just your basic +2 or +3 zoom. We're talking about +5, +6. So even though in previous sandboxes I very much talked favorably when it came to other high impact fusions, I think in this sandbox, Erentil with these big, huge Amelon scopes is still what's allowing it to stay so competitive. And before somebody brings up Alatha, yes, Alatha is a pretty good fusion rifle, but it's missing one big component, which is of course Rangefinder. It's got Amelon scopes. It boosts that zoom all day long, but Rangefinder seems to be the key component that's tying these fusion rifles together. So that's why Erentil to me, guys, is still the best high impact fusion rifle, even in this sandbox, despite all the nerfs. The combination of very, very high zoom and the ability to roll Rangefinder, as well as other perks like Under Pressure and Firmly Planted to allow for consistency. So guys, that is our review for Erentil, as well as just in general high impact fusion rifles in this current sandbox. I think these fusion rifles are actually really, really good, especially with the right roll on an Erentil. I think it's going to catch people off guard. You don't see them used a bunch though inside of trials, outside of Bastion. And I'm really hoping that this video, alongside any other fusion rifle video we make, might actually begin to correct that. If you're good at baiting enemies, or even playing with certain subclasses which gives you the aerial advantage, you'll be amazed how well a good rolled Erentil will work for you. Something I've done here recently was actually played on Top Tree Dawnblade with an Erentil, actually threw an Icarus mod on it, and I had so much fun with this roll. So try it out for yourself. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
Slap that like button like your mama told you right.